Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Released December of 2022. Retailing for $49.99 and available on all modern platforms. This is a remake of the PSP game Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, which you might notice is one of the first Trapped games I ever did a video on. I guess it is no longer Trapped. Anyway, Crisis Core is a prequel to the much-loved Final Fantasy VII. Taking place before Final Fantasy VII, it follows a cast of characters and a story that is strangely either never mentioned at all during the events of Final Fantasy VII, or just barely mentioned. Our lead is Zack, part of Shinra's Soldier program. He hopes to rise up the ranks and become a hero. And in stark contrast to all the characters that were in the original Final Fantasy VII, Zack is actually a likable character. At the beginning of the game, Zack is dealing with some of the last days of the Wutai War. But as soon as that's over with, the real plot begins, which centers around the desertion of two soldiers who seem to be as famous as Sephiroth and on about his power level. They are Angeal and Genesis. Angeal, incidentally, is the original owner of the Buster Sword, which, unlike the original Crisis Core, in this remake, you actually get to use the Buster Sword, eventually. And there's actually a combat mechanic where you slowly learn to use the Buster Sword and become more efficient with it. And that is one of the very few additions to this new version of Crisis Core, along with a handful of missions, a general increase in the quality of graphics, and a smoother, updated combat system. And that is sort of the problem with this as a new product. It is just Crisis Core again. So if you played it on the PSP, there's not a whole lot to draw you back in. And it still feels like a handheld game that you're just playing on your TV. That's why the mission system is here, where in between story beats, you can do these optional side missions that are short. So if you only have a few minutes to play, you could still technically feel like you accomplished something in the game. That's why you only have Zack here, you don't have a party of characters. That's why there's not a huge number of places to explore or NPCs to talk to. Because this was meant to be an experience that you'd have in short bursts over many days. And sitting down with it and playing for hours on end from the couch kind of ruined the experience by showing the flaws with it. It's also strange to me that they updated the quality of the in-game graphics, but they didn't do much to the vast majority of the cutscenes. It looks as if they just took the cutscenes from the PSP in most cases, and just upscaled them. So the quality actually goes down when a cutscene starts because the in-game graphics now look better than the cutscene graphics, which is kind of ironic. It's also a little odd that they made this game fully voice acted, because all the main characters have their own personal voice actor. The few NPCs that you actually encounter outside of the main cast are clearly sharing a small handful of voice actors. Which I understand there are budgetary limitations, but why didn't you just not voice the various little characters? I just don't think we needed to hear every civilian actually talk. Now the combat, on the other hand, has been changed, and for the better. Part of that is just that all the platforms this will be on have 2 analog sticks, but compared to the original, things do move quite a bit smoother, and the interface for it is far less clunky, which makes using special attacks and spells a lot easier, along with items. And making the combat smoother has also had the added effect of making combat easier, as so far as I can tell, enemies behave the same way and have the same stats, but they seem easier now from simply having better controls to fight them with, which means you can take on harder missions earlier, which will give you better equipment and materia, which will lead to story missions becoming very, very easy if you're spending time doing the side missions. Part of this will be from leveling up doing side missions, although leveling up in this game, like the original Crisis Core, is handled in an unconventional fashion. There is a slot machine constantly going in the corner when you are in combat. The reels have various character faces on them, and are numbered 1 through 7. When 3 of the same face come up, you get a special attack, or a summon, depending on the face in question, and various combinations of the numbers will give you different effects in combat. They could level up one of your materia in a particular slot. They could make spells cost no magic points. They could nullify magic or physical damage, or make you completely invincible. And most importantly of all, if you get triple sevens, you level up. And while the game would like to pretend this is completely random, it's pretty clear there's an experience system behind the scenes that's telling it when to give off that jackpot, and this ends up making actually grinding levels a much more annoying process, as sometimes the game will withhold levels from you, and then you'll suddenly get triple sevens 2 or 3 times in a row. Usually right after a major story event, too. And this feels just as unnecessary now as it did in the original version of Crisis Core. So is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion worth your money? Well, that all depends. Did you play the original Crisis Core? Because if you did, you don't need to spend another $50 on this version. And if you didn't play the original Crisis Core because you were possibly too young at this point, or didn't own a PSP at the time, are you a big fan of Final Fantasy VII and its various spin-off media? Because this is a game that doesn't do very well standing on its own. And if you're not a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII and the various spin-offs, you're not going to get very much out of Crisis Core in and of itself. And this is not a problem that's necessarily unique to Crisis Core. It's kind of a problem that a lot of prequel media ends up having. So, I would only recommend Crisis Core to someone that never played the original Crisis Core, and is a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII in general. Everyone else, save your $50. There are a huge number of more worthwhile experiences at that price. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.